You're listening to an episode recorded during the time Innovation Fuel was part of University Canada West. We are proud and grateful for the work we've done together, and we want to thank the university for being in our podcast. We are now excited to continue the journey of Innovation Fuel into its next chapter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Innovation Fuel, a business podcast by University Canada West.
Bringing you fantastic stories from accomplished entrepreneurs and key industry professionals. Let's explore the entrepreneurial world through local businesses and our university community.
Hello, Dave. How are you today?
Oh, God, it's been one of those days. I need to teach students how to gain some skills, especially entrepreneurial skills. Where do students get entrepreneurial skills? How do we expose them to these things?
This is a really interesting subject because you cannot gain the skills until you practice it. For example, if you want to learn entrepreneurial skills, you need to maybe work with entrepreneurs to see that's what there's skills they have that made them successful.
Yeah, almost to the point where you're getting that mentorship element. You're getting those pieces where you're getting to feel what they're going through, what their day in the life is like. And even maybe that leads you down the pathway to, hey, maybe I can start doing a small little venture over here and try and test it out before I move to a bigger venture.
Yeah, if you talk to students, most of them will talk about it, real life experience and real world practice, real world examples. And those real world, it happens when you're in the real world, in the site, in the field, and work with people. And this is the best opportunity for students to gain skills, especially entrepreneurial skills.
I agree. And I think, Gelareh, I got a hunch that we might be talking to someone today that might have some experience with this and might have an organization that might be able to help some of these students.
Absolutely. So our guest, Scott, is going to explain how students, especially domestic and international students in the post-secondary, can gain entrepreneurial skills. Let's welcome Scott. Welcome, Dave. Welcome, Scott Stirrett, to another episode of Innovation Fuel.
Welcome to Innovation Fuel, brought to you by University Canada West. We've got a really neat conversation coming up here with our friend Scott. Before we get going, we need to know a little bit about you.
First off, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, and it's a pleasure to be here. I am the founder and CEO of Venture for Canada, which is a national charity that fosters the entrepreneurial skills and mindset of young Canadians. And our thesis as an organization is that because the world is increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, increasingly all young people need to be entrepreneurial. And that to be entrepreneurial is to identify and act upon opportunities to create value for others. The value that can be created can be economic, social, or environmental. One of the most effective ways to teach entrepreneurial skills to young Canadians is through recruiting, training, and supporting young Canadians to go work at startups and small businesses across the country. We have 3 core programs: a fellowship program that recruits, trains, and supports recent grads to go work at startups, an internship program that recruits current post-secondary students to do short-duration internships, an entrepreneurship program that recruits, trains, and supports current students to do short-duration projects that are 5 to 7 hours per week over 7 weeks. This year, we'll have approximately 4,000 young Canadians participate in our programs from coast to coast to coast. And in terms of my background, I grew up in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I then went to study at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., where I saw the Venture for America model. And I thought to myself, this is such an interesting concept. What about applying it and bringing it to Canada? Immediately after I graduated from university, I went to go work at Goldman Sachs in the United States. And while I was at Goldman Sachs, I saw firsthand the challenges that a lot of young Canadians have in finding entrepreneurial work experiences upon graduation or while they're current post-secondary students. So I decided to leave Goldman Sachs to go launch Venture for Canada full-time. I've been leading it for 8.5 years. And in that time, we've gone from just being a little idea to a national organization with 35 full-time employees that supports thousands of young people.
You said something interesting about entrepreneurial experience for students. So what do you mean by that?
What we do with our programs is that we recruit, train, and support young Canadians to go work at startups and small businesses. So what that entails is, it depends on the program, but all of our programs revolve around practical work experiences at startups and small businesses across the country. So for our fellowship program, that is a year-long full-time employment. For our internship program, that is a 3 to 4 month internship period where someone is working at a startup or small business full-time. And for our entrepreneurship program, that's a short duration. So you're doing 5 to 7 hours per week over the course of around 7 weeks. So in essence, entrepreneurial experience or entrepreneurial work experience is different depending on BFC programs, but they all revolve around providing young people practical work experiences in startups and small businesses. With the final point being that this experience can be transformational because essentially young people then have the opportunity to see firsthand what's involved in building a business or startup from the ground up. That in essence, learning from successful entrepreneurs in this kind of work experience is one of the most effective ways to learn how to be an entrepreneur later on.
So, Scott, when you went down this journey of this element of doing internships and fellowship programs in this element, you said the concept and the idea, came from, you said there was a US faction of a similar sort of model.
Yes, the initial idea came from an organization called Venture for America, of which your listeners may know of Andrew Yang, who is the founder of Venture for America, who I know a little bit through experience. So I saw Venture for America. I had a friend who applied to Venture for America and didn't get in. And I have a friend who applied to Venture for America and became a fellow. And I never applied to Venture for America because I'm not a US citizen, but I thought this is such an interesting idea. Why not apply it to Canada? So we're legally two completely separate organizations. And it's a great example that a lot of innovation isn't around inventing new things. It's about adapting things from certain settings and bringing it to a different country. So in the case of Venture for Canada, we're very different than Venture for America today, but the initial idea definitely was an inspiration from the United States.
Is your platform or your companies offering these kind of services for Canadian students or international students as well?
For our fellowship, it depends on the program. For privately funded programs where Venture for Canada determines the rules, international students are able to participate. For publicly funded programs that are funded through the Government of Canada and delivered on behalf of Venture for Canada, and there are funding requirements that restrict international students, only non-international students can apply. So it depends on who is funding the program.
I want to back to you and your journey and figure out what I found it that you found a gap in Canada when you compared with the United States, but I want to know more about your business model. I understand, but it would be great if you explain what problem you're solving.
So a few different things. On the highest level, it's that young people do not have the skills that they need to thrive in a changing economy. That when one looks at entrepreneurial skills, and we use a framework called EntreComp that stands for the Entrepreneurial Competency Framework. It breaks entrepreneurial skills into 15 different areas. And those include everything from coping with uncertainty to working with other people to financial literacy and 12 others. Is that when you look at the World Economic Forum and a lot of these future work studies, the skills that are often highlighted that are most lacking in young people are essentially entrepreneurial skills. So the problem that we're tackling at a high level is that all young people need entrepreneurial skills in order to be successful in this changing economy. And our programs help equip young people with the skills that they need to create more impact, both in Canada and around the world. And this is also backed up by data that generally, depending on the program, between 80 to 92% of our program participants self-identify that Venture for Canada has helped them to develop entrepreneurial skills through their participation in our programs. What we are doing is we're helping young people develop entrepreneurial skills to be more impactful in their careers in the future.
So when you're going out and finding, and you're going out and instigating these elements of connecting these entrepreneurial skills, you're going out, you're reaching out to students. On the other side of it, how are you bringing the other pieces in for giving them the experience? How do you bring the partnerships with the businesses? How do you bring those pieces into your model?
Last year, we had around 1,200 employers hire program participants through Venture for Canada, build connections with employers through a wide variety of different ways. Including at the highest level, brand marketing and through our website and just general outreach activities. Venture for Canada has its own podcast as well, which is part of our broader brand marketing efforts. So that's the broad brand building can be helpful in terms of some employer engagement. 2 is collaboration with different employer associations across the country, be it incubators or accelerators, and chambers of commerce, et cetera. 3 is through staff who specifically are targeted around building different partnerships with organizations. So that can be direct outreach to different employers, but also, and this kind of relates to point number 2, is we form memorandums of understanding with some organizations where we'll, in essence, say, oh, we work with you and we'll try to reserve X number of spots in our programs for employers from within your circle. And the 4th major way that we will build relationships with employers is through referrals. We have a really active employer advisory council at Venture for Canada that's composed of around a dozen entrepreneurs from coast to coast to coast. And that is a part of our broader efforts to really engage employers across the country so that they are advocates for promoting our programs. And we also do that through an annual conference, including which our second conference will be taking place in April 2023, that engages all of our employers and also is an awareness raising mechanism for our programs across the country.
When you're going through this idea of building Venture for Canada, you built it as a nonprofit organization. Why did you build it as a nonprofit organization?
Yeah, and the first thing to clarify is that we are technically a registered charity, which is a kind of nonprofit. Venture for Canada is a registered charity in Canada. And the reason why Venture for Canada is a registered charity, it's funny, I was asked that question a lot at the beginning days of Venture for Canada. I haven't been asked the question more recently, but there are a few reasons. The first is that Venture for Canada is most viable based on the work we do as a charity. I don't think it would actually be super viable as a for-profit entity. The reason being is most of Venture for Canada's funding comes more from government sources or from donations. More for-profits do receive funding sometimes from foundations or government, but Venture for Canada is most viable, I think, financially based on the work we do as a charity. So the first is around viability, the spirit of the organization. And I think what I set out to create and what a lot of people are working to build is to say that I want Venture for Canada to be something that is like way beyond myself and that is something that like way outlives me. I think that what we're trying to build at Venture for Canada is a charity that is around 100 years from now. And that is creating a huge amount of impact in 2120. And an interesting thing is when you create a charity, and if the charity really becomes entrenched, an entrenched charity is in many ways more prone to have really significant longevity. As I think about long-term impact, I think registering as a charity was a great decision because I think it sets Venture for Canada on the trajectory to be an organization that creates impact for a really, really, really long period of time.
A lot of entrepreneurs go out in the world and they don't think about this option. They think more for the, how am I going to make money? How am I going to make money? How am I going to make money? But there is a bigger idea here and bigger concepts that, this could last longer if you choose different pathways to success, depending on what that element is.
Yeah. And I think as somebody gets older, people think generally like more and more of legacy and kind of what is the legacy of your life? And I'm relatively young, I'm only 31. Even as I would say, maybe someone more tuned to others about like death than I always thought of it even as sometimes like a child, is legacy is an important thing. And it's to say like the impact of Venture for Canada is the first and foremost and most important thing. But also when I think about like the legacy of my life, that if I was to die today, like the principal legacy of my life is building Venture for Canada. And that it's something that was way beyond me. I was just at an engagement party for 2 fellows that met at Venture for Canada that are getting married. And I got a really nice email where they were like, we would never have met if it wasn't for you. And there's so like literally hundreds of stories of if I think like Venture for Canada had never been created, all of these things that would not have happened in terms of positive impact on people's lives. So to answer your question, like somewhat more selfishly also is like, I view entrepreneurship as a vehicle for both creating a huge amount of positive impact, but also at the end of the day, leaving a significant positive legacy for people in the future.
And I love it because I know, Scott, I know from past conversations we've had, you had a lot of success in funding some things and bringing that forth into the Canadian economy in supporting small, medium-sized businesses. Isn't that what I've heard before?
Yeah, I mean, Venture for Canada, we grew from literally having no money to last year we had revenue around $14 million. So we were the fifth fastest growing charity in Canada over the last 5 years, according to a report from the Veritas Foundation. So we've been lucky to have grown a lot over the last 5 years. And I think that that's a testament to our focus on impact and our high quality program delivery.
I love it, my friend. Now, let's shift a little bit of gears here. Let's shift back over to the importance of entrepreneurial skills. What do people need? What entrepreneurial skills do people need to be successful in anything out there?
So going back to the EntreComp definition, at a high level, the way we define being entrepreneurial is the ability to identify and act upon opportunities to create value for others. And there are 15 different elements of EntreComp. And if I was to focus on a few of the specific entrepreneurial competencies that I think are the most important, I would say one is the ability to cope with uncertainty, because that is, the world is just endlessly uncertain. As we tape right now, there's war with Russia and Ukraine, climate change, potential conflict with China. Like the list goes on. Like the amount of uncertainty and instability in the world is mind-numbing. And I think as an entrepreneur, you're constantly in situations every single day that are uncertain and ambiguous, and you don't have all the information and you're making guesses. So I think you as an entrepreneur have to be really comfortable in highly uncertain environments. And I genuinely believe that comfortability with uncertainty is like a muscle that you can develop over time. The more that you run from uncertainty, the stronger that uncertainty like plays in actually controlling you. Every single day you should try to do things that like make you uncomfortable in some kind of way, because that's an important thing of life. I work with a public speaking coach, and this morning we actually were role playing having difficult conversations with people, where it was just really difficult conversations that I had to have. And it was great. Like I love working with this person, partially because it's like it prepares me and it helps build that muscle of when I actually have difficult conversations that I've been like regularly practicing. So first off would be that to emphasize as a skill is that comfortability with uncertainty. The second one that I would in particular focus on would be working with others. At the end of the day, businesses or organizations are all about the people. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If you are really bad at working with people and motivating them and managing them and leading them, you're not going to be able to really create impact at a large scale, because only so much you can do. And ultimately, I think that people who are the most impactful are ultimately the ones who can get like the right people in the right place and can successfully execute. I would say a third one that I would emphasize within the EntreComp model would be creativity. That I think the ability to just constantly think up and create new ideas. To the Steve Jobs definition, that creativity is the ability to connect dots people don't see. I think the most creative people are people who have like really wide interests and are just constantly reading and learning and talking to new people. While creativity is probably somewhat innate, I also think it can very much be like a learned competency. And to the point about like working with others is really important to act on opportunities. But to identify opportunities, which is the other big part of the EntreComp definition of entrepreneurial skills, is the ability to be creative. And ultimately, and creativity, the other thing too, is it's not necessarily, as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, about purely coming up with new ideas. It's about taking existing ideas and adapting them to make them better, or to adapt them to a different setting in different kinds of ways. So to recap, I think if there are three ones I would really emphasize, it's coping with uncertainty, creativity, and working with others. And if you want to learn more about the other 12 entrepreneurial competencies, you can Google EntreComp, and there's a lot more detail online there.
And I love what you're saying, Scott, because I'm always constantly saying to the students I'm dealing with and to people I talk to, I always build it around the 3 C's of collaboration, creative thinking, and critical thinking. And I think, those things, are around us. How do we get beyond, and how do we create more ideas and think differently about things that are out there? When you're going through this journey, do you have any mentorships that you have along the journey?
Oh yeah, 100%. There's a lot, and I'm often to the point about taking my own advice is that I'm often in situations where I'm completely out of my comfort zone, and that's probably why I've done Venture for Canada for 8.5 years. We've doubled in size in terms of our staff over the last 3 years, which has taught me a lot of new skills. But to answer your question about direct supports, one is through our board of directors, the board chair of Venture for Canada, who I've worked with for many years and has provided a lot of great advice, but also the entire board in different kinds of ways can function in giving me a ton of advice. When I look through my texts, usually on like most work days, it's like majority Venture for Canada board members. And it's about a wide variety. Right before this, I was texting with a board member just about a bunch of random things in the news. First off would be the board and the chair. The second would be through coaches. So I've worked with a variety of different coaches over the years who've been really helpful in giving me advice. And the most effective coaches, they're not telling you the answers. They're just kind of getting you to realize things that you were blind to. And ultimately, the only one who can fix your own problems is yourself, which is an important thing to remember when thinking about coaches. But coaches, I think, are really helpful. And to just be a place to sometimes like vent a little bit too. The third one that I think has been really helpful for me is peer support. So I've been part of this thing called, it's like a peer entrepreneur group where everyone else are for-profit entrepreneurs, and the group has evolved over time. So there's 11 of us in the group. We meet like once every 6 to 8 weeks over Zoom and occasionally in person. There were 8 people from the group who were from the original group, and then we've actually added in 3 new people into the group over time, and 3 people left. So it's been actually cool to see like the evolution of the group over time. And this has been out actually 2.5 years. So we got to know some of these people extremely well. That people will share different problems, and then people give advice and share kind of experiences. So that's a third area that's been really helpful. And then I would say a fourth is just ad hoc relationships that I fostered with executive directors of other organizations, be it one other charity that I'm involved with as a volunteer, someone who I have regular conversations with and I've learned a ton from, and I think he's learned from me. And a lot of these kind of ad hoc peer conversations have been really helpful to me. So to recap, I would say the 4 principal ones would be the VFC board of directors, formal coaches, a peer entrepreneurship support group, just other peers in general, in particular from like more sector specific who run like very similar organizations and getting their advice. And I would say related to 4 is one person who I foster relationship is the CEO of an organization that's around 100 employees. So they're like a VFC 3 times, and they're also an entrepreneurship charity. And those kind of conversations are helpful, like chatting with people who are running organizations of more complexity, because then you get a sense of like, okay, how do we get there potentially in the future?
When you think about Venture for Canada, does Venture for Canada have any kind of competitors in this market?
No, I mean, I think the concept of competitors in the charitable space, I think, is a little bit different than for-profit, and just to be, I think, wary of using the language of for-profits with nonprofits and charities. I think that there's a fair number of organizations that broadly provide like similar services to Venture for Canada, albeit they generally focus on different like age groups. So for instance, like Shad Valley and Junior Achievement are both entrepreneurship charities, but they focus on high schoolers. In terms of Venture for Canada, there's other organizations that deliver internship programs on behalf of the government of Canada. They're often more like sector specific, or they have like no sector. The great thing about Venture for Canada, and when I first was deciding to launch the organization 8.5 years ago, this was important, was I interviewed like 10 different charities, and I asked them like, who did entrepreneurship programming, would you support Venture for Canada to exist? And they were like, yes. The point being is that we addressed a gap that was completely underserved in the Canadian ecosystem, which is why I decided to launch the organization. So we are in my view, really only organization in the country that is specifically focused on entrepreneurial skills development through providing work-integrated learning opportunities at startups and small businesses in Canada. There's lots of organizations that are around entrepreneurship development, but we're the only one that's specific in terms of doing it through work-integrated learning. To use the language of for-profit, there would be indirect, potentially competitors, but really none that is a super direct organization that is doing the exact same thing in our space.
So, Scott, what's the future look like for Venture for Canada? Where are you going next?
It's a great question because we recently completed the 10-year vision for VFC as an organization. And there are 3 pillars that we want to focus on. The first is network building. The second is entrepreneurial skills development. And the third is equity, diversity, and inclusion. And in terms of what the future of Venture for Canada looks like, it's a few different things. One is that we deliver up to 10 different programs across the country. Currently, we deliver 3 programs. So it's launching more programs, more initiatives everything from fellowship programs for artists to fellowship programs for farmers. Like there's a lot of different verticals and new programming that we could launch around entrepreneurial skills development. So that's one area. Two is a continued focus on EDI and disproportionately serving young Canadians from communities that are underrepresented in the Canadian entrepreneurial ecosystem, such as folks who are Black or Indigenous. Third one to emphasize is a continued focus on growing across the country and being truly representative. So serving Indigenous communities, Francophone communities, and really being a coast to coast to coast organization. We are a huge and vast country, and it is not easy to build a genuinely national organization, but working hard to continue to do so through a diverse range of supporters. The future Venture for Canada high level is around continuing to serve more people. In 2032, the vision would be to serve 25,000 young people per year, to have those young people be disproportionately come from underrepresented groups, and to ensure that we still have high quality program delivery. So high levels of satisfaction, high levels of self-assessed entrepreneurial skills development. So at a high level, Venture for Canada 2032 is our vision is that VFC, one of the leading entrepreneurship charities in the country, and that we are an organization making a significant impact on the future of Canada through training and supporting tens of thousands of young Canadians each year.
I love it, Scott. Now, knowing this, we're coming to the end of our show, my friend. And before we leave, we like to throw out a challenge. Do you have a challenge for our audience, either a micro challenge that your organization, Venture for Canada, has experienced that you need some support with? Or is there a macro challenge out there that we can throw back to our audience?
I will focus on a challenge for the audience. I think probably the biggest mistake people make when they think about career development is that they focus too much on passion and too little on skills development. And there's a great book called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport in the career development space. So I wasn't the one, I'm kind of copying his ideas. But I think a lot of people end up being unhappy, or they just jump from thing to thing aimlessly because they are so focused on trying to find their passion, the elusive passion, that it's often more productive to focus on skills. And in essence, what are the top 2 to 3 skills you want to develop? In focusing on skills that make yourself useful to this world, you then implicitly find your passion potentially, because in essence, by making yourself useful and creating impact, you can become passionate about things you might never have anticipated. So to answer your question, my challenge to listeners is think around what are 2 to 3 skills that you really want to develop that will make you really useful in this world and help you tackle significant challenges of meaningful importance. And focus way less on the finding your passion, because finding your passion, ironically, will lead you down a path of frustration and wasted energy.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Gelareh. That's another episode of Innovation Fuel.
Thank you for listening to Innovation Fuel. We are on all podcast streaming platforms, Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Visit our website at www.ucanwest.ca/Innovation Fuel. Also, follow us on Instagram at innovation_fuel.